Hi, my name is Monica Chen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. We're a nonprofit dedicated to educating people about the impacts of their food choices as it relates to public health, social justice, and the environment. Today, I'm very excited to say that we are hosting a webinar with Sid Garza-Hillman. He is the author of Approaching the Natural, a health manifesto in raising healthy parents, small steps, less stress, and a thriving family. He holds a BA in philosophy from UCLA, is a public speaker, podcaster called What Sid Thinks podcast, certified nutritionist and running coach, and founder of smallsteppers.com. He is the Stanford Inn and Resorts Wellness Programs Director and race director of the Mendocino Coast 50K Trail Ultra Marathon. He'll be speaking for about 30 minutes today, and then we have some questions from the audience that were pre-sent prior to our webinar, and also we'll be interacting with the participants as well.
Any questions you guys have about nutrition? I'm a certified nutritionist. I've been coaching and teaching people for 12 years now. But I don't want the discussion to be swayed away from what this is really about, which is really not food. The challenge of being vegan in the modern world is nutritionally not really about food. It's incredibly healthy to do this. I think the idea is, well, if I'm not doing, I get this all the time, if I'm not eating chicken, I just need to be really careful. It's like you're giving up something less healthy for something more healthy. Now, can you be wildly unhealthy and vegan? Of course. So that's why I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this real quick primer on nutrition that applies to most people. I'm a nutritionist and I do not think about food day to day. I don't measure, count, or weigh anything. And I don't for my family either. My kids eat really, really well. It's simple and easy. Part of my passion these days is to really normalize this decision. We're often kind of cast as outliers, like, oh, the vegans, like they're the weird vegans. And some of us are weird. Look, can we just be honest about that? But I'm just a dad and a husband. My kids play soccer and basketball and take ballet. We're not outliers. We eat food and we do cool stuff. I just want to kind of simplify this down for people. So here's my healthy eating. And I had somebody time me in North Carolina. It was 6 minutes long. So I'm going to ask you to envision every food as a box, as a gift box. And as you would get a present, it has wrapping paper on it. Okay. So every present has wrapping paper. And I want you to think about the wrapping paper as the calories of that food. It's the protein, fat, and carbohydrate. It's just where the energy, that's the calories. I say it's the gas that goes in the car. But what's inside the box are the things that come with the calories. Things like vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants and fiber and water, the stuff that comes with the calories. So the gas that runs the car is the wrapping paper, and the motor oil. The car doesn't run on motor oil, but it needs it to keep the machine running well. Likewise, we run on the calories, protein, fat, and carbohydrate, but we also need stuff that makes our machines run well. And I want you to think about that as inside the box. So what I tell people is there's foods that are light box foods and foods that are heavy box foods. Foods that are light box food, interestingly, most of them are vegan, meaning they don't have animal products in them. But if you look at white, sugar, like cane sugar, even if it's, white sugar technically uses bone char, but white sugar, oil, protein powders, white flour, white rice, they have calories. I mean, they're food. You can burn that energy you can burn the calories for energy. But inside that box, there ain't much there. They're refined and they're not healthy. And Oreo, as you'll see in a subsequent slide, is vegan these days. But it's clearly a light box food. Just because it doesn't have animal products doesn't mean that it's healthy. As you go up that light box to heavy box, animal products have more in the box than white sugar by far. But if you keep going up, then you get into nuts and seeds. Then you get the fiber that feeds the good gut bacteria that keeps us healthy and super important right now during this whole coronavirus, feeding that bacteria, our first line of defense of our immune system. Moving up from there, heavier box, beans and whole grains. Moving up from there, fruit and then vegetables. So the idea that if you give up animal products, you have to be more careful is actually a myth. It's actually not true because you're bringing up more nutrition with your calories the more heavy box you go. Whole plants are the heaviest box foods, period. They have plenty of protein, fat, carbohydrate, but that's sort of neither here nor there because what they have with them makes our machines run well. And so even like I said, as a father, I'm a 51-year-old, ultra runner. I don't think about food. I don't measure, count, weigh. I eat enough heavy box plants to give me enough energy. And then they come with such good stuff that I don't get sick and I'm, in good shape. And so my family is too. So I don't know how long that took. But as a parent, if you're looking to feed your kids well, you're going to get messaging. When I give a talk in person, which, you couldn't see if I showed you this, but I have a pamphlet and everybody wants to they can always email me through my site and I'll send you a JPEG of the thing. But it says, it's a pamphlet we got in the doctor's office. And it says, a good start, nutrition during pregnancy. We got this years ago when my wife was pregnant with our twins. We have 11-year-old twins and we have a almost 16-year-old. At 100% plant-based since birth, except for breast milk. I have to say that because people go, what about breast milk? And they go like, you got me. Anyways, so it says a good start, nutrition during pregnancy. And on the back, because I was looking through this going, there's some nutty nut stuff in here. I looked at the back and it says copyright 1988, revised 1992, National Cattlemen's Beef Association. So they're the issuer of the Good Start Nutrition During Pregnancy pamphlet brochure in the doctor's office. What this means for parents and for kids alike is we're up against that kind of crazy. That's an ad campaign. It was one of the reasons why right then, and I was actually in school almost 12 years ago, in school to be a nutritionist at the time, I said, I'm never going to sell anything nutritional. Like I have t-shirts and stuff, but no pills, powders, nothing. I don't do it. I'm not against anybody who does. For me, there's a conflict of interest there that said, I want to advise people and not go, by the way, here's your problem and here's your solution for $20. It's an ad campaign. And I don't think it's appropriate in a doctor's office. I don't think it's appropriate anywhere. And so my point is that it really creates a conflict for parents who want to do best by our kids, because then we start being afraid. And we start going, oh, I don't want to, I've worked with parents who are fine changing their diet to vegan, but they're not going to take that chance with their kids because they're good parents. But they just lack the information to do it well. You don't have to, people oftentimes go, oh, your kids are 100% plant-based. I bet you have to be really careful. And I go, yes, I do. I have to be really careful, just not as careful as parents who are feeding their kids dairy and meat. So we do have to be careful. We do have to pay attention to be healthy vegans, to be healthy plant-based. You have to pay attention. You want to know why? Because you can go in the market and there's a Twinkie or Oreos that are vegan, and then there's a cucumber. And we have to be paying attention to make that decision if we want to make the decision to fuel our bodies better. We don't have the luxury of wandering around the forest like we were doing thousands of years ago and just eating what we could find. Blackberry, we eat it. Well, now we have a decision to make about food. And it puts us in a rough spot, period, because we have to be able to do this. And by the way, adults battle with this all the time. We have to make a decision about this. And then we have to say, like, am I going to eat to, fuel my body? And then maybe it doesn't taste quite as good as the thing that is designed to light my head on fire. But then on top of that, I have a doctor or somebody not trained in nutrition telling me that somehow a cucumber is lacking in protein or something, or, romaine lettuce, which is spinach, huge source of protein, like a massive source of protein. But what about, and all of a sudden you're in this rabbit hole where you're battling this out and there's fear and stress about it. So part of my mission and why I'm so passionate about this is to really demystify this and to calm people down, especially as parents. We have enough to worry about. Trust me, you read the news, we got enough to worry about. Feeding your kids whole plants is the last thing you need to worry about. It's so cool. It's liberating. It's why I feed my kids this way, not because it's harder. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Nutritionally, not harder. I feed my kids this way so I don't have to think about food because there's too much other stuff to think about. Dig? Okay, so how long was that? I don't know. Let's just say it was 7 minutes. So to choose or not to choose, that is the question. What I'm getting at, and again, happy in all caps, is because this is a choice. This is a choice that we are making. And when we make a choice as parents or kids who are becoming, my daughter is 16, she's working on a book about being a vegan teen. We can't forget that choice. And here's why. Because of what we're up against, because we're up against those kinds of pamphlets and just random people talking to us about diet when we didn't ask for their opinions, and then family members, Uncle Jack, who decides that he's going to feed the kids dairy when we're not looking. Like this is not even a joke. Like this is constant stuff that I've had to, help clients with over the time. Well, my husband feeds them on purpose ice cream, even though they're lactose intolerant. It's just stuff. It's heavy duty. If we forget that this is a choice that we're making to live better, to raise our kids the best we can, then day to day we do better in terms of keeping our own stress down as parents so that we are in the right frame of mind to do this. It's easy to raise a kid vegan, but to raise a kid a happy vegan means that a parent is going to have to be engaged in his or her way that they parent. And I'm going to get into how we communicate this and how I advise people to communicate this. But this is a big choice. And what you're choosing, let's be clear, is something that overwhelmingly most people do not choose. And it makes it harder. It is more stress. I don't want to lie about that. I want people to understand that this is a more stressful thing. But here's what I always say. A successful marriage is hard work. Being good at your job is hard work. So is raising a healthy family. So is raising a healthy family. So is making the right decision by your children, no matter what the rest of the world is doing. This is difficult. And you know why? It should be. Because we earn it and we feel better for it and we're stronger for it. I don't want to and never tell people like, this is so simple and easy. You'll never have to worry about a thing. Of course you will. But I can't phone in my own marriage either. I want to be able to be the kind of person who can be engaged enough to say, here's what's working, here's what's not. I've been married 25 years. It takes an effort, probably way more for my wife because she's this whole thing going on. But in general, it's work. So anything worthwhile takes work. Anything worthwhile. And there is almost or nothing more worthwhile than children. It's like the best thing in the world. So I could, in one hand, do an easier thing and go like, you know what, I'm just going to kind of feed my kids whatever everybody else eats because I don't have to deal with it. Give them string cheese and goldfish crackers and hard-boiled eggs because I guess that's what kids eat. And so I can just feed them that, and then I don't have to worry about this. But I do because I know better. I know about the environment, the environmental impact of this. I know that the ethical in terms of the animals, but also I know about the physical bodily impact of not eating well. I'm not going to do it, even if it's harder. Even if it's less hard to just do what everybody else does, I'm not going to do it because I know better. So I have to remember that choice, or at least work to help people and myself remember that this is a choice that we are doing that is setting, I call it, we're an ethical minority because we're choosing to do something that most people don't choose. Most people go into Starbucks and they just kind of, whatever I feel like, man. And we go, okay, doesn't really matter what I feel like because if that thing has animal products in it, I'm not going to do it regardless of how I feel. And so it is about personal strength. It is about becoming strong enough individually to be able to act in line with your values, both in your own actions and also how you parent your children. So this is why it's a philosophy discussion above all else. So this is called restriction versus choice. And again, I obviously touched upon the choice thing. One of the perceptions of veganism is that it's a restrictive move. Because if you look at food only, I mean, in 1992, I graduated from UCLA and I was had a philosophy major, and I always joked that it was preparing me perfectly for what I was pursuing at that point, which was to be an indie rock musician. So there I was playing gigs at night, but lifelong asthmatic. I'm huffing inhalers and the whole thing. And I read a book and it correlates, if not sets a causal kind of thing, that dairy is related to asthma and possibly a causal factor in asthma. I thought, well, that's kind of dairy, like what? We need your calcium kind of thing. So I gave up dairy for a month. My asthma went away for the first time. And I never went back, obviously. And so asthma gone, no medication since I was 22. So people go, oh my God, I can never give up cheese. I'm sure everybody's heard that. I can never give up cheese. And what they're saying is, I could never do it. If I did that, my life would be as miserable as yours. Yet that was not my experience. As I gave up dairy and didn't have asthma, felt better singing playing music, felt better going for a run and not coming back and wheezing for a half hour afterwards. I thought, yeah, I'm restricting my diet, I guess, by not doing dairy. That's a restriction, but my life got better for it. So if we just look at food, and this is why ultimately for me, the vegan decision is very little about food. It is a state that we adopt and then we execute those values via what we eat, but really it's the values first. And I always want to get people, kids who are doing this, teenagers who are doing this, and adults who are doing this, and parents who are doing this, to be in touch with the fact that this is a decision you make, an ethic, and then it's how it's played out into the world. So that's sort of secondary to the decision at first. So restriction is, to me, it's nutritionally not a restriction at all, because as I said, as you move up the heavy box, if you're eating that version of vegan, it's not restrictive. You're getting way more nutrition than you would from animal products or refined plants. But also, it's not even a restriction in terms of your lifestyle. You feel better. My kids don't have allergies. I grew up with allergies and the strep throat and thing, and then allergy shots and the asthma. They don't have that. They have clear skin and they feel good. They get sick once in a while, but not too sick, and they're good. And like I said, good athletes and everything else. And lo and behold, their teeth are there. So that's what that is. So I want to talk about real quickly for parents and also for any teens who are watching this, how I communicate and advise people to communicate the vegan ethic. And again, as I said in the beginning of this talk, my passion right now is to normalize this. because I think it's normal. I think it's like, actually, I think it's more normal for us to eat this way physiologically than it is to eat a Big Mac by far. Everyone goes, fruitarians are crazy. I go, really? But a Big Mac, that's normal? Like, whoa, how we've kind of upended that whole model, right? So I was thinking about this years ago when I started doing talks around the country, which was really, what are the values of my family? Like, what am I trying to instill in my kids? And I came up with a list, and I always, like, my kids don't like, it's not on a board that my kids have to salute every morning. Like, okay, so this is just sort of like a thing that we talk about. It's just understood in the Garza-Hillman house, which is, we teach our kids the following kinds of things: no stealing, no cheating, no hurting animals, no hurting people, no lying. Those are sort of the basics, just the right and wrong of that. Now, if you heard that list, hurting animals was one of those things. It was not separate from the ethical decision making. I would say we take care of our self-care is an ethic that we teach our kids. It's part of that whole right and wrong that parents, to be a good parent, I believe, is to model that, number one, and to teach it, number two. We are teaching our kids right and wrong. If you're a vegan parent, you've probably been accused at some point of brainwashing your kids. When I wrote my Healthy Families book, Raising Healthy Parents, I write in there, I go, you're darn right you've brainwashed. That's what the job is of a parent. We are teaching our kids right and wrong. The only question is, how well are we doing it? Are we teaching our kids right and wrong, or are we sort of going, let them figure it out? No, I don't think that's appropriate. I think parents are there to guide their kids, to teach them how to think for themselves, but to show them in a respectful and intelligent way right and wrong. I think that most parents who would think I'm crazy for raising my kids vegan probably teach their kids not to steal. To me, there's no difference. It's a right and wrong. It's, do you treat your body well, is a right and wrong issue for me. Are you taking care of it? It's not that you can't have treats, but in general, is there an ethic of self-care? I want my kids to understand that and to see that in my wife and me, that we take care of ourselves. It's possible. And not only that, it's awesome. And that when we eat this way, it's because it's fun, not because it's laborious. And we're just like, oh no, another, like, we're doing okay. We're eating food that we love and it's fun. And we have no conflict about it. We're not like stressed about it. And we're healthy and vibrant. So in communicating that ethic to your kids, but also to yourself, I think it's a really good idea to adopt that kind of, again, reminder that this is a choice, and this is just one of the things of right and wrong in the world. And that way, vegan isn't separated from something else entirely. And again, I'll kind of come back to that, I could never give up cheese idea. I've actually had this a few times where I'll be teaching at the resort where I run the wellness center, and people go like, oh, I've been dairy free for 10 years. And I go, oh, really? No cheese? And they go, well, no, I eat cheese. Cheese has become so important that it's literally been removed from all other food groups, including dairy. Cheese is now an isolated food group in and of itself. You can technically be dairy-free, apparently, and still eat cheese. It's the most amazing thing. And this is the conversation. I think it's fun, and I want people to like have fun with this, because it's sort of like, I go, okay, well, cheese is not even technically dairy. Like, it's full on dairy. Like, it's just dairy. There's no getting around it. And then we just have a laugh about it. And we can move on about it, but how interesting we are about that. So anyway, moving on. So I'm going to get into the kind of the nitty gritty. Coffee in a heated mug that my kids bought me. Okay, I'm just saying. And they're vegan. So figure that out. Okay, so setting up for success and the search for pleasure. This is getting into sort of boots on the ground for parents. This is talking about kind of how to do this healthy. Okay, so I'm going to go into kind of the healthy thing. This is very interesting to me because I am all about stress. So as I'm talking about raising healthy parents, for instance, it's about helping parents maintain a manageable level of stress so they can parent the way they want. I don't advise people how to parent. I'm not a parenting expert. But I will say that when you're not super stressed, you parent the best way. When you're super stressed, you're usually not parenting well. So how do you manage your own stress? So teaching your kids how to sort of eat healthy. But there's a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. And I don't want to get too technical here, so I won't. But it's generally the thing that allows us to go, I mentioned that almond croissant because I love those, to go like, I feel like that almond croissant, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it either because I don't think it's healthy for me, or maybe that doesn't matter because you have a treat now and then, or you go, it's not plant-based and ethically, I don't want to eat it because it has animal products in it. Either one. But there's that separation they call executive thinking. It's that kind of overarching kind of intelligence that's beyond the gut sort of, I just feel like it, so I'm going to eat it. Well, that part of our brains takes about 25 or 26 years to mature. So imagine a child at 8, and you're going, you need to eat your vegetables, but there's also junk in the cupboard. that's a battle that is beyond for kids. And guess what? I never have worked with, well, I've worked with kids with parental supervision a couple times, but mostly I'm working with adults. They are battling this, and they're 40, 50, 60 and beyond sometimes. They're battling this. And so imagine how difficult that is for kids. So one thing I highly advise is for parents to create a sanctuary of sorts in the house, which is keep things choice minimal in the house. And meaning, if you have a bunch of junk food everywhere, it's going to set up conflict for you because you're going to be like, don't eat that, you can't eat. And then for them, and they're going to rebel and they're going to hide and sneak it and everything else. So in parentheses, you'll see that it says hide the, because Oreos are technically vegan. So hide the technically vegan Oreos. Hide them. If you want them in the house for you, hide them, because I don't want battles. That's what I want to avoid. So if you just have food in the house, kids are going to eat it. And if it's healthy and there's not a lot of junk food in there, they're going to get hungry and they're going to eat it, and then their taste buds are going to adjust and they're going to dig it. But if you're always having junk food available, it creates a really big conflict because they're kind of battling the same thing that most adults are battling, but kind of times 50. So it's one of the things of like, set yourself up for success. Try to minimize the chance of conflict and battle in your house. And that means if you've got the junk food, put it away so it's not readily available and readily accessible, so that you don't have to have a fight every time you're sitting down to eat. Have colorful, beautiful things out. I do a cashew ranch dressing. It's on YouTube. It's like people love that video and they love the freaking dressing. It's so good. So put that up with some cut veggies and sort of leave it out there, and the kids will go. They dig the colors, and we're that's the antioxidants and plants gives them the colors. We're attracted to that for a reason, and that's why like Kraft macaroni and cheese is so orange. They know, because we're attracted to that kind of stuff. So if you put the natural version of orange out there, we do better by that. Okay, moving on. On that note, this is called a big one for me, a MOT. And all I did was take a phrase and make an acronym out of it most of the time. If there's one thing that I came up with over the years I've been doing this that stuck the most, and I didn't see it coming, it was this. People love the idea of MOT, and it's so relevant when you're talking about families. Most of the time means your health is dependent on how you eat most of the time. Your happiness is dependent on what you do most of the time. What I want to avoid is people getting hung up on this idea of militant, or like just becoming militant. Like, once I know what healthy food is, then I can't have anything but 100% healthy. I think that sets us up for an inordinate amount of stress, and in the family context, it's a nightmare. So as parents, and also as kids, if you're doing this yourself, understand that it really is what you do most of the time. Having a treat now and then is not it's even scientifically backed, but it's just a true. If you eat well most of the time and you have a treat now and then, it does not matter. So when people go, oh my God, what do you do when your kids go to a birthday party? I go, well, I send them with a dessert, but it's not going to be a healthy dessert. I'm not going to set them with a freaking, cucumber mousse. It's like it's a vegan junk food dessert. Vegan because of the ethical part of it. Junk food because I don't really care that one-off. It's a one-off. I don't care, because I know that we have a good platform at home, a good foundation of health. That goes for me too. We have treats. We have things that are less than healthy. We have white sourdough bread. It's vegan for ethical reasons, but it's absolute literal junk food. But I don't eat that all the time. Most of our calories come from very healthy stuff most of the time. So I liken it like if you have a marriage where you argue all the time, but then on Valentine's Day, you're like, I love you. That's probably not the best marriage ever. But if you don't argue most of the time and get along really well most of the time, but have an argument now and then, that's probably a super successful marriage. In fact, I would say if you never argue, you're probably not communicating, right? So if you can sort of adopt that most of the time ethic, then as a parent, you don't sweat the one-offs. You don't sweat they went to a friend's house and had something that was not so healthy, as long as it's vegan. And I have every intention to coach parents, like, if it's an ethical thing for you, then it is like, hey, listen, they can eat junk food once in a while, but no animal products. That's a right and wrong issue. I have no problem about that at all. But it is about most of the time. Now, this is not like, to me, because it's an ethical thing, I don't sometimes not eat vegan. I always eat vegan, but not always healthy. So I don't cross ethical lines. My wife doesn't either, and our kids don't either. But in terms of nutrition and stuff like that, a one-off, I mean, big deal. And so, right? Because parents are like, well, now that I know something's healthy, if I give them an Oreo, I'm a bad parent. It's like, no, you're not. You're just a parent, and they're having a treat. It's okay. It's not only okay, they're going to thrive, because then they're happy and they have a treat. And again, that becomes sort of normalized in that regard. And here we are, we're kind of coming to the close here. So essentially what this is about is raising healthy parents. Now, I was talking to the FFAC crew about this earlier, that sometimes teens are trying to do this and their parents are, the parents are the reason why there's, and I've had this, like teens want to be vegan, but their parents are like, oh my gosh, because their parents are going from the same thing that most parents are going for, which is getting nutrition advice from a medical doctor. I don't criticize Western medicine. I'm not anti-Western medicine at all. They're not trained in nutrition. Now, there are some doctors who become trained in nutrition on their own volition, but they didn't get that in medical school. So it is, to me, my issue is when an MD oversteps her or his bounds by talking about nutrition when it is not their job. It's as inappropriate as if I were here talking about medicine. I'm not trained in medicine. I would never have that discussion. I've had clients say to me, I'm going into chemotherapy. What do you think? I said, that's none of my business. That's between you and your doctor. Let me know what you decide and we'll work on support nutritionally. That's what I do. The reason why there's sometimes some stuff you get back from your parents is because that's usually the source of information for them nutritionally is from a non-nutritionally trained source. And so they are worried about things like protein, even though it's abundant in whole plants and we're eating way too much of it anyways. So so understand first that they are doing that because they're worried about you. They're doing it because they're good parents. They're doing it because they're like, oh, I don't want my child to be hurt by this. And that is excellent. That means they're very, very good parents. It is only a question of, do they have the information? So Dr. Joel Fuhrman wrote a book called Disease Proof Your Child or Disease Proof Your Children. Excellent book. I think it should be in every doctor's office. It's a great book. Eat to Live, which is also he wrote. Proteinaholic, China Study. There are very, very good books out there, and I would definitely advise like simple books because there's just no reason to go down the rabbit hole. Like it is really easy to eat this way, but it's just sort of getting over that fear of mostly protein and calcium. Interestingly, meat and dairy. So it's like that's that pamphlet that I got in the doctor's office because that's the ad campaign there. So if you can sort of go like, look, here's what I read, mom and dad, and check it out because this is really cool. And I've been reading and looking at some stuff, and I think it's excellent. And I think I'll be healthier for it. Is it a battle? Sure, because again, your parents are worried about you, and that's as it should be. They should be worried about you, but it's just an informational thing, right? You've just got to inform them the way that you got informed, and understand that. And learning how to take care of yourself. If you're, 16, 17, 18, you're, approaching adulthood, learning how to do that well so that your parents can see you feeling better, having more energy, being fitter, if you're into athletes, if you're into athletics, being a good athlete, like those kinds of things, your parents are going, oh my gosh, that's working. That's kind of cool. And then they might try that themselves. So that leads me to this final slide, which is, how I finish up my talks, because to me, raising healthy parents is the number one thing that a parent can do is to make themselves healthier and happier. And that's how you raise mostly a healthy and happy child, is by being that yourself. So Albert Schweitzer wrote, example is not the main thing in influencing others. It is the only thing. And it is ultimately the example we set as parents. I can tell my kids to eat this, go eat that, go eat that. But if they see my wife and me being miserable, if they see us not being healthy, if they see us being unhappy eating vegan and they think it's kind of a hassle and too much of a hassle, there is almost 100% chance that they will become adults and not do this. They will either rebel against us or do it because we told them to for a while. And then as soon as they're out of the house, they're going to be like, that was ridiculous. So it is as an ethic of a parent to set that example, but it also goes the other way. So if you're a young adult or, getting to be an adult, setting that good example to influence your parents too. In fact, some people think my book, Raising Healthy Parents, is for kids to raise their parents. It's actually for parents to raise themselves, for parents to be healthy and happy in themselves so that they set a better example for their kids. And obviously there's tools to do that. But the thing that I want to finish up with raising healthy parents is that that's really what this is about. This is about taking on this choice in a way that reminds you how great of a choice it is day to day, so that you can be happier with your choice, so that you can be healthier and more vibrant with your choice. If you forget about the choice, then you're looking at technically how it looks that it's easier for everybody, but it's not. It's not really easier because you know more. And once you know more, if you don't act on that, then you're bogged down with this thing of like knowing better, not and take care for it. So to be stronger in your own body and mind, to be able to bring this out into the world in a very positive way is awesome and profound. And on that note, I will wrap this up with that's me or whatever. And I think we're going to take some questions if they've come in, and I'm happy to answer them. Should I stop the screen sharing? You tell me this.
Yeah, let's maybe like in a minute or so people could grab the titles of your books or your website. So while people are doing that, if they want that information, Sid, thank you so much. That was so helpful. And I have received a lot of questions in advance that people were able to submit. And actually a lot of the questions that were submitted were things that you brought up in your presentation. So that's great. It kind of shows that everybody is thinking along the same lines here. So as we transition over to question time, I will remind everyone that if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to start with the questions that we received in advance to make sure we get through those, and then we'll get to as many questions that come in on the chat as possible. So I'm going to start with one question, Sid, and maybe as you're answering it or towards the end of answering it is when you could stop sharing your screen. Cool. Is that in your work, you talk a lot about small steps. Right. And there's a question of if you could kind of expand on what you mean by small steps. And I'd also like to throw in there that FFAC is definitely all about small steps. We really try to prioritize meeting people where they are. And so I think this is a great kind of way that your work and our work is connected. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my whole, as you can see, Small Steppers is the program I run. I am primarily focused on it is, I'll put it this way. Here's my program in a nutshell. Here's my approach in a nutshell. First, it's to find, and I'm going to relate this to parents because this is what I talk about in the book, which is know who you are ideally, regardless of how you've been acting. And here's what I mean. I'm using myself as an example. So a few years ago, I would come home from work, and oftentimes I'd be stressed from work, and I'd come in the house, and there's my phone, and I've got email, and I've got my kids there, and I've got my wife there. My wife's a graphic designer, so she works out of the house, and I wouldn't be with them. I'd be like, I'd be on the email and all this kind of stuff. And what I realized pretty soon, and which was part of the inspiration for the book in the first place, which was, that's not who I am. I didn't say like I'm a bad father. I was like, that's not the father I am, ideally. That's not how I want to behave. And so the first cornerstone of my approach is to have people ask about themselves as a parent, but also if I'm working just with an individual, how they are ideally as an individual, regardless of how they've been living. To ask those questions, if you were living ideally based on your terms and your values and your ethics, how would you be doing things day to day? And I ask people to define that first. So I would say for me as a parent, I walk in that house and I'm with them. I leave work at work and I'm with them and I hang out with them and I put my phone down. That's my ideal. Then the question was, well, how do I get that going? Well, then I was able to think about it and say, okay, well, one of the things I could do that's stressing me out is I listen to the news in the car on the way home. So I stopped doing that. Sometimes I just don't listen to anything, or I listen to a fun podcast or music. I pull in my driveway, and before I get out of the car, I take about 5 deep breaths. And then I walk on the house and I put my phone down most days. And it just changes because you realize I'm not a bad father. I'm just not being the father that I know that I am ideally. And so where the small steps comes in is simply to say, okay, once you have defined who you are and how you want to behave ideally in the world, your ethics and even just how healthy you are and all those things ideally, then the small steps approach that I have is to help people craft the size step that is appropriate for them to begin acting right away. The most common misconception of my approach is that everyone thinks I break everything down in 2-minute increments or and there's people who talk about that stuff. That's not me. I ask people, what is the amount that is appropriate for you that keeps you not too stressed? Here's why. The reason why diets fail, for instance, is because it's too much. It puts people into overwhelm. And if you take on everything all at once because you want that change so bad, and you change everything in your life, there's almost 100% chance that eventually you're going to burn out and go back to what you were doing before. So where small steps comes in is it says, okay, given my motivation and given my life, what am I able to do right now? Okay, so I'm gonna give you some real examples with clients. I started a client off one time, and again, by started, I mean like it's a conversation between me and them, and then they come up with an idea. 1-minute walk around their living room. That was their that was their small step of exercise. 1-minute walk of their living room. Because they weren't exercising at all. And the idea of going out for 5 miles is insane. And maybe they could do that, but they'd probably get injured and they'd go like, I hate exercising, they would say. So 1 minute. And then that built from there. I started a client off who was eating junk food, and I mean fast food, 3 times a day. She had already yo-yo dieted 50, 100 times, 50, 100, so it's a number, and had already yo-yo dieted. And so I started, I could easily as a nutritionist say, don't eat junk food, as if she didn't know that. She knew that. So I said, what can you do every day that's not going to upend your whole life, not going to make you miserable, not going to put you on a diet that's going to fail? What can you do? 1 stalk of celery per day. Actually, it was 1 stalk of celery or a few slices of pear or apple. That's what she decided. I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with that. This is 50 years of eating fast food 3 times a day. Now she's got a stalk of celery or a few pears on this, a few slices of pear. In 2 weeks, I called her and said, do you eat healthy food every day? And for the first time in 50 years, she said, I do. And what that does is it changes our minds. It changes how we look at ourselves. So she was able to honestly say, I do eat healthy food every day. That begins the ballgame, because then she can build that stalk of celery into 2 stalks of celery, and then eventually more. And notice I haven't taken anything away from her, but she's building in all this stuff. And all of a sudden eventually with more and more, she starts to feel better and starts to see what that's like. There's a difference between that and putting something in full bore. Now, the exception is I worked with a client years ago who had stage 4 cancer when he came to me, full on liver, colon, the whole deal. He changed his diet overnight. Why? Because for him, that was a small step, because it wasn't too stressful. Because of his life, he was like, no, this is happening right now. And 3 weeks after he got changed his diet, he goes, I've never felt better in my life. He's still stage 4 cancer. Didn't cure cancer. I'm not going to say that it cured, but he goes, I've never felt this good in my life. He's got stage 4 cancer and he's riding a bike around New York City. And he goes, I feel really good. And he ended up living 5 more years beyond what they expected from him. So the small steps approach is to simply be engaged in your level of stress when you take anything new on, so that you don't take too much, but also you don't take too little either. You want the change to affect. So it's that kind of sweet spot. And as what you do starts to get kind of boring, you add. And then if it gets too much, you subtract a little bit, and you kind of always keep that and you move forward. And I found it extremely effective for helping people build habit change and build behavior change in a way that sticks long-term. I've never met anybody who wants to lose weight and gain it back. They always want to lose it and keep it off, but diets only promise weight loss. They don't promise long-term health. And so I'm here to say, like, if you want it to be a thing that you are just a person who is healthy, then you've got to set the stage for long-term behavior change, which means you can't take on too much or too little. So that's my small steps approach in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you. Feel free, Sid, anytime now to stop sharing your screen when you're ready. Done. And then
I think
you're good.
Okay, I can't. Okay, I got to get out of this. There we go.
Yeah, we're seeing you just fine.
Cool.
We had a couple questions come in about experiences that you have had working with pediatricians. You did obviously mention the pamphlet example at the beginning of your talk. And people just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you're dealing with pediatricians that may or may not be supportive of your children eating plant-based.
That's a good question. And my answer may surprise people. So I apologize if this is just totally not what people expected me to say. I don't get into the conversation with pediatricians. I go to pediatricians for what they're trained to do. And most of them will be a little bit, in your face about it. I mean, I get are your kids getting enough protein? Do you know where they're getting their calcium? I mean, I get that every time. My kids go to the pediatrician to get a physical. My daughter's on the swim team, so she has to go get that. And the kids, they get a checkup once a year. I keep it like, you do your job, I do mine. I don't say that, but that's what it is. As soon as the discussion of food comes up, I go, oh yeah, cool, got it. And I kind of just move on. You're not going to win that discussion. You're just not going to win it. And it's not even worth having. If it really came down to it, you could say like, hey, there's a doctor. And this is why I think it's good when doctors become trained like Joel Fuhrman, because he's an MD and he got trained in nutrition. So you can say, listen, there's a cool book. You should check it out. Beg off. Do not get into a thing, because you're not going to change their mind and they're not going to change your mind. Your job as a parent is to raise your kid the best you can. So it's tempting to go like, well, spinach has more protein than beef, which it does. But in the doctor's office, it is a losing battle and it's going to cause you more stress. Don't do it. So go in for the checkup, go in for the blood pressure and the height and the weight and the charts and the things. And if they get sick, then go in for that. But as soon as there's a discussion of nutrition, just kind of nod politely. And then go, and then go do your thing, because you're not going to change their mind. I hate to say it, but you're just not. So ideally, they would go, that's amazing. I'm going to start telling people about this to other patients, but they're not going to do that.
I will say that's great advice. I will say there is a website. I could put it in the chat. I think it's like plantbaseddoctors.org or something, where you can, if this is something that you want to purposely seek out, you could search your city If anyone really is looking to find a plant-based doctor, they do exist all over the United States.
Yeah. Here's my only, and Michelle McMackin's a buddy of mine. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's been on the speaker circuit. I love her so much. But anyway, she was on my old podcast, Approaching the Natural, and she and I kind of got into a little argument about this. And on one hand, I love that doctors are becoming trained. In fact, Michelle McMackin got a grant. She's been training doctors to, in plant-based eating. It's incredible. My only hesitation about that is that it's perpetuating this idea that a doctor is somebody to go to for nutrition advice, because they're not. And until it becomes an institutional, all doctors are trained in nutrition in medical school, I just assume people don't go to a doctor at all. And so if you specifically seek out a plant-based doctor, that's amazing. But it's best not to get into the just general habit of going to an MD. In my podcast, I came up with just for fun, a character named Randy the Mechanic, who people go to for marriage advice. And the idea was like, that's crazy. Why would you go to a mechanic for marriage advice? And that's really what's happening when we go to a doctor. It sounds like they should know about nutrition, and people go, they don't even know it. It's like, they're not supposed to. That's not their job description. Like, there's no criticism. That's not their job description. Just like I didn't get trained in medicine. And so I really do want people to understand, like, that's their job, and a nutritionist, that's what their job is. And if a nutritionist tells you about some antibiotic, walk out the door, because that's totally inappropriate. That's not what they're trained for. So just kind of know who does what, and find the best people to do those things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So moving forward here through our questions, we had a few questions come in related to specific events. So things like wanting to know your advice on, for example, Halloween. How do you handle both allowing your children to fully, participate in something like Halloween while not participating in the possible animal cruelty side of things with some of the foods that are involved in that. We also had someone ask about, like, how do you handle parties for your children? You did kind of touch on that throughout your talk. So any advice with regard to specific events like that?
I do. So first of all, I'll talk about parties, and I'll talk about even adult parties too. What I advise people is, you don't want to make it laborious for the person hosting the party. Like, just like for years, my wife and I are like, what do you need? We don't make food. We will bring food. Now, side note, if you're going to a party and you're bringing your own food, bring a ton, because what happens is the non-vegans will eat your food and their own non-vegan food, and then you end up with no food. And so make it taste super good, but also make a bunch. Because we would go with like a vegan lasagna, and it would be like gone, and we'd be like, oh crap, because now we have nothing to eat. So make enough. But with parties, we would always just be like, we'll bring it, and they'll be like, no, and we'd be like, no problem. Now, I will say, as frustrated as I get that I feel like I'm not having enough of an impact, my wife will often go like, remember that now when we got here to where we lived 15 years ago, we would always bring food. Now people are like, oh no, like 99% of the meal's vegan. And not because of us. We're the only vegans in the area. Like, we're the only vegan family. So it's not exactly like we're hanging out with other vegans. So there has been a transition where people sort of, for whatever reason, they make these parties. So my kids are now going to parties where they're like, oh, they're already making vegan cupcakes. I'm like, what? Really? Oh yeah, because this person's got lactose intolerance, so they decided to just make vegan because we're vegan too. So it's become easier over time. But my advice is, send the food. Make it easy on the host. Don't just go like, no, absolutely not. I will bring food. Don't sweat it. And then it changes. You become less of the pain in the ass. And so, just to be frank, so it's sort of like, you don't want to be, again, like, what's the example you set, right? Make it easy on them. Now, when it comes to Halloween, my kids trick or treat. Then they don't eat that candy. They give it to whoever else they're trick-or-treating with. And that's how that goes. And then we have vegan candy at home. It's junk food, but like, you've got those awesome peanut butter cups, which are like freaking, I can't remember what it's anyway, you see them at Starbucks. The dark chocolate ones are vegan. Justin's. And like, those are amazing. And so, and there's tons of, the good news is like, there's no better time. Like, this is you can find any kind of vegan candy. There's vegan candy corns, all these kinds of things. So that day they have vegan, there's like Mounds bar types of things, like all sorts of cool stuff. So we just do a trade, and now my son, and at first I was like, oh no, what do I do? Because it would just kind of scare me. But he'll go up to a house and he'll be like, he's like 11 now, but when he was like 8 or 9, he'd go, is that vegan? And I'd be like, oh no. But then I thought, well, what the heck? And what do I care? And they're like, oh my, no, whatever. But anyway, he would sort of go, is it vegan? Anyway, so short answer is we trade it out and we give them vegan candy and they have it, and it's a day. And that's why the most of the time comes into place so much. Like, I don't want to be the parent who goes, you can't have the Snickers, but here's a carrot instead. And all the other kids go, holy man, I will never do that. So that's kind of what we're avoiding. And I don't want my kids to feel like that either, like they're losing out. They love the vegan candy. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. So along those lines, I see there's a question in the chat related to this, and we had a question come in advance about this, related to the topic of parties or events. How do you ensure that your children don't feel, like the odd ones at the party, or really are standing out as the people doing something different? How do you approach that with them?
Again, I'm going to say something that may not be expected. That comes with the territory. And I don't mean to sound heartless, because I don't want my kids to feel self-conscious, but at the same time, you are doing something that most people don't do. And I just got a question about this yesterday on an interview that I was on, and it's like, just by not eating, you could not talk about food at a party. You can have a plate of food and you're just eating it. Somebody will come and talk about the food on your plate. It's the most amazing. I never talk about somebody else's food, but they'd be like, why are you eating chicken? Why don't you eat chicken? Oh, you don't eat chicken? Why don't you eat chicken? It's like, why are you talking about my food? This is so disturbing, right? So there is an unavoidable reality, which is that here's what I believe. I believe that when you make this choice, I think most humans are actually humane. What I always say is, I'm driving behind somebody and a squirrel comes into the road. I've never seen somebody swerve to try to hit the squirrel. People swerve. We have sort of this basic, most people, unless you're a psychopath, have a basic kind of compassion. And we've been led to believe that we have to eat animal products because we're going to die without it. And that creates that conflict. But I think most people sort of understand this. And so when we come and are plant-based, it's sort of a mirror on them, and they feel judged by what we're doing, even though we're not judging them. We're not talking about it. We're not saying like, you should be doing this. We're just doing our thing. It comes with the territory. You've got to be strong enough to deal with that. Otherwise, you're going to give in and sell out yourself. Don't sell out yourself. Do not sell. You've got to toughen up so that you go, yes. And you talk to your kids and go, look, you're doing something that is so good for you and awesome, and it's great. Some people are going to be threatened by that. It has nothing to do with you. And that's the job as a parent, to make sure that they feel that they understand what they're doing. But I think it sells them a false idea if you say, oh, just be like everybody else. Why is that such a good thing? Like, yeah, we do this better. We do this thing better. We eat really better. Like, we're not, we do this better ethically. Like, we don't want to hurt animals. So that's why we eat and sort of move on. So that's what I would advise. I wish I had an easier answer for that, but your kids are they're going to stand. I mean, my daughter was harassed by a teacher's aide when she was 12 for being vegan, as if 12-year-olds aren't already self-conscious, the teacher's aide going, oh, look at the vegan freak. Now, as a parent, I can go like, okay, that's it. I don't want to be vegan anymore. But then I break my ethical line and I don't do best by my daughter. So I'm not doing that. My wife aren't going to make that decision. So that's this, like I said, this ain't easy. It's worth it, but it's hard work.
So what about, because we've had several questions related to others sabotaging the way your children are eating. So whether that is other family members feeding them products when you're not around, or maybe the teen or young adult trying to eat plant-based, but their own parent sneaking, food items into their lunch pack or something like that. So any advice related to just others sabotaging the way that you are trying to have your children be eating?
I do. And so this is again, the mindset of this. Remember, like I talked about in the talk 1,000 times, remember that this is an ethical choice that you're making. Even if it's just about feeding your kids healthy food, that's still, to me, it's an ethical choice. You have to remember that, because if it's an ethical choice, imagine if your uncle or whoever is doing this said to your kids, go in that market and steal something. Go in that market and steal. Go steal something. It's like that. So if somebody were to tell your kid and set them up to go steal something, you would be like, don't ever tell my child to steal something. That's insane. We don't steal. I teach my kid not to steal. What do why are you teaching them differently? When we separate food out and sort of make it a different thing, then we sort of lose, because what somebody will respond is, oh, a little egg isn't going to hurt them. And they're right. A little egg ain't going to hurt you. Little milk ain't going to hurt you. Nutritionally, not going to hurt you at all. But if it's an ethical line for you, then you have to understand that it's in that list of other ethical right and wrong issues. And it means potentially having a somewhat uncomfortable talk. You can do it totally respectfully. You don't have to do it in their face all crazy. You can just be like, listen, I know you gave them stuff. Please don't do that, because we're trying to teach them that's not a good thing. We really don't want to harm animals, and we want to feed our bodies the best we can. I know a little bit won't hurt them, but it's an ethical thing, and they know it. We're nice to animals. I don't ever show my kids anything negative, but I always say we're nice to animals. We don't harm animals. So it means, again, I'm going to come back to being strong enough to stand by your guns as a parent. Protect your child. That's your job. So if you can develop that in yourself, and you can have that conversation with whomever, with a friend, and be like, look, I know you didn't mean anything by it, but it is a right and wrong thing for me. Like, we don't teach our kids we teach them not to steal, but we also teach them not to harm animals. So if you could just not feed them animal products, that would be great. And if it keeps going, they're not respecting you, and they're not respecting your kids. And so that's a decision to be made. I've never had that happen. I've had those talks. I've never had somebody go, well, I'm doing it anyway. If they did, I'd be like, well, then you're not seeing my child. And I would do that for any ethical thing. If they said, well, I'm still going to have your child steal, I'd be like, then you will not visit my child. And that's how that is. That's our job until they're into the world and being able to protect themselves.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to move us to the topic of B12. We've had a few questions come in about whether you have specific recommendations for people of how much B12 their children should be taking. Okay, so if you could just speak to B12.
Sure. So one of the common, and this will raise hair on people's necks who have hair, I don't, and that's okay, is that B12 is a thing. They go, okay, what if vegan diet was natural, then what about B12? Now here's the thing. If the vegan diet were deficient in B12, then every vegan animal on the earth, and there's lots of them, would be B12 deficient. Gorillas and elephants and giraffes and cows and oxen. Interestingly, cows have B12 because the conventional wisdom, you got to eat meat for B12. Well, the cow's vegan. So why is there B12 in the cow beef when the cow is vegan? If vegan is so bad, here's why. Because B12 is a microorganism in soil. So it's not that the diet of the vegan diet is unnatural for us. It's that our food system has removed the dirt and the bacteria from the food. If we were eating a vegan diet in the wild, if you went into the forest right now and ate wild lettuces and blackberries and whatever you could find, it would have dirt on it. It wouldn't be clean, and it would help populate that gut bacteria. That's why the plant-based diet is deficient. Now, a buddy of mine, Garth Davis, he wrote a book called Proteinaholic. He said a lot of people he's working with, he's an MD, that are eating meat are still B12 deficient because their gut bacteria is so crazy and their digestion is so crazy. So I have a recommendation, which is it's a small price to pay to take a little supplement under your tongue of B12. Usually about 1,000 mcg a day is plenty for a child. And I don't even do it every day, but most days I so we do a spray. I'm not connected to it financially at all. I'm not connected to anything. I don't even have an affiliate with anybody. So when I tell you something, it's not because I'm selling it or have a financial stake, but I have a spray called Complement that a buddy of mine, Matt Frazier, created. And again, not connected financially. And it has B12D, which is from the sun anyway, and DHA, EPA, long chain fatty acids. And it's a spray, 6 sprays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, it's 3 for kids. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because I have 3 kids. And then my wife and I, 6 sprays each, and we're done. The whole thing takes 30 seconds. Big deal. Small price to pay. Every other nutrient that I can get, I get from food. So there's, in my house, and I'm not advising anybody here, but in my house, there's no multivitamins. The only thing we take is that Complement spray, but you can buy it separately, B12 and D, and maybe DHA, EPA if you need to. But most people with hemp seeds and flax seeds get plenty of omega-3 fatty acids in their bodies can sort of make the longer chain. Most people can do that. So it's pretty easy to do, but I would recommend it. And honestly, with clients, I recommend meat eaters still take a B12. We're too sterile. We become too sterile. And so making sure you've got that going on.
Okay. And I will say, I just happened to have been on a webinar that Dr. Michael Greger did last week, specifically related to B12. So if you're someone who follows nutritionfacts.org and the videos that he puts out, he'll have some specific video recommendations coming out soon of like 0 to 6 months, 6 months on, just all the different stages of life. Good. So you could check that out. Yep. We did have, and we're getting down on our last few minutes here, so we'll try to get another question or two in. I had two people ask about what about if a newborn baby is breastfeeding? After they're done breastfeeding, what would be your recommendations for what to feed the baby after that as a transition?
Good. So I will say really quick, while they're breastfeeding, to me, and we did this with our kids, and so our kids have a very wide palate. While they're breastfeeding, don't stress out so much about the food, but it's more like introducing them to taste. So like my first for the twins, it was like papaya, and then I would make these puddings out of like avocado and cucumber and hemp seed, and I would blend it, and I would put maybe a little bit of Bragg's aminos or something just to kind of, and then I'd sort of feed them whole plants. So as you're transitioning them out of breast milk, you're sticking to whole foods and enough calories of them. So, obviously they can't chew things yet because they stopped breastfeeding. My kids went to 21 months, but if they stopped at 6 months or 8 months, they can't chew. So making, whole plant Vitamix is like key in this regard, but whole plant kinds of things that are blended together that are phenomenal. But fruit, people do not feed their kids fruit. It blows my mind. Fruit is amazing. It has been vilified because it has carbs in it. My kids have one rule in the house. They can eat fruit whenever they want. They could eat 4 bananas 5 minutes before dinner and not be hungry from dinner, and I'm the happiest dad in the world. So fruit, mashed up bananas, it's got a ton of stuff in it. So people are like, what do I do? And again, I understand that fear, but something as simple as fruit, mashed up apples, mashed up fruit is phenomenal. It gives the kids the calories, and it's so good and so healthy. And then mashing up other whole vegetables after that, and then adding in some nuts and seeds, butters, almond butter, things like that eventually. And then it gives them enough calories, and it's really easy, and it's still super, super healthy. So that's where I would go with that.
Okay, thank you. So I want to squeeze one more question in, and it'll be our final question, but it is the last one that was submitted in advance. I want to be sure that we get to that. And then Monica will have an announcement before we hang up here. So Sid, how do you encourage children to be passionate about the rights of animals while keeping it from becoming a policing situation where both your own food consumption and their interactions with others become affected? So this person is saying, they're really inspired by specifically children who become passionate about the rights of animals, but like kind of how do you make sure that they aren't maybe becoming too intense in social situations and things like that?
Okay, so I'll sound like a broken record, but that's up to the parent, right? And so my kids, I would say they're somewhat passionate about animal rights, but this is me, and I've talked to other parents who go like, I've showed them the YouTube videos of factory farming. I'm like, good Lord, I would never do that, because we already act on it. So I am constantly, and my wife constantly, in the positive end of this thing because we've already acted on it. So that way we get to go, this is why we do this, because of things that happen, they hear certain things. And so we just don't want to dwell on that. It's so stressful, like to hear, I was speaking at a veg fest in Florida, and I walked by a table on my way to the bathroom, and they had a screen up and they were showing stuff, and I glanced over and saw something horrific, and literally I'm out for 2 days. I can't get that image. I don't want to think about that. I've already acted on it. So as parents, to embody that pleasure and that fun, and it's great that we're nice to animals so we can do this stuff. If you feel like your kids are sort of getting down to that rabbit hole of militancy, that's not going to be good for them long term, and it's actually not going to affect change that they want. So making them understand, like, if they can focus on being healthy and happy too, and showing how much fun this is, then they're going to affect change more than they would if they're like getting in people's faces. So that's just a way that you teach your kids how to communicate to people. I think it's very important how we present in the world that this is normal and fun and awesome. Otherwise we wouldn't do it. So that's what I would say on that note.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll have to end it there. I think that even for some of the questions that were coming in the chat, we hopefully hit on at least the general topic if we weren't able to specifically answer your question. And you all have Sid's website. He also has a YouTube channel, which I'm sure you talk about a lot of the topics that we talked about here today. That they might be able to reach out to you for more questions or just to get more information. I did see a couple people commenting about how helpful your books have been to them.
Oh, great.
Just so you know that if you didn't see that. So obviously go ahead and pick up one of Sid's books. If you want to know more about his thoughts on things, listen to his podcast. Sid, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, so fun.
I'm going to pass things back over to Monica for just a quick announcement before we all leave the meeting.
Cool. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Sid, I know you talked about so many different things on today's talk, but what I got out of it was cucumber mousse, which I'd never heard of before. The idea of
I never have. I literally made that up on the fly.
Their birthday parties.
I made that up on the fly. I hear that at the same time you do, and I go, "Good God, what am I talking about?"
Thanks, Sid. Anyways, thank you all so much for joining us. It's so good to see our community members here, our interns. Hi, Alina, Jolene, Malik, our friends, our teachers. Thank you for joining us. Please support our work. I put our donate button donate link at the bottom of the chat. And also, Sid was supposed to be speaking at our Veg Fest, which has been rescheduled to be a virtual event on July 23rd. We really hope that you can join us at 5 p.m. Pacific time. The link is in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining us.